Welcome in, everybody, to the first episode of the week of Director's Cut. I'm Jax Kinney alongside my co-director at iOS TV Sports, Drew Frey, and our immediate guest today, no waiting to bring him on, Will Trubshaw. And Will, we're happy to have you on because you're one of the biggest baseball fans we know, and we've talked about it before on the show with you. But I think we can finally say baseball is coming back.
Yeah, finally it was pretty ugly just to watch how it all unfolded. But after a lot of scratching and clawing, I think finally we will have baseball. Obviously, there's still one thing that can screw everything up, and it would be the coronavirus. We already saw
Right.
Charlie Blackmon of the Rockies test positive. Obviously, earlier in the week we had the Phillies, 8 people at their spring training facility test positive. So I think that still looms over the season. But, I mean, this was a huge thing for baseball. They were dragging their own reputation through the mud. They needed some way to salvage anything, and I think this was it. I do mean that. I mean, it was a tough look for baseball to be fighting over what they were fighting for, especially in a season that really I think you could call a one-off. I would
Yep.
hope that by 2021 things go back to normal. They should have saved a lot of the fighting they were doing, a lot of positioning for the actual CBA come after the 2021 season. But again, we do have baseball. We'll have it for 60 games. I at least will look forward to it. Something to kind of distract from the craziness that's going on out there right now.
Yeah, I'm so excited that MLB's finally coming back. It will be. They're going to try and set all this up. It's been a long time coming, but as you mentioned, that they've spent a while of time dragging, the league through the mud, and this isn't the end of the fighting, as you sort of alluded to. Right now, this is a commissioner's imposed season. The players rejected the final offer from the owners, and the season that's going to be playing out is pretty similar to what that final offer for the owners was proposed. The main issue is the players want the ability to file a grievance
And they
at the end of this
sure
season.
will.
Yes, they're 100% going to, because they believe that the owners didn't act in good faith, because from an owner's perspective, they're going to make money off the playoffs. They're not going to make money off of the regular season. So they wanted as few games in the regular season as possible, so that they only have to pay their players as little as possible, and then they can still get all the postseason revenue in there.
It 100% was the owners stalling to get to this point. But you mentioned to get to this point, I think we should go over what the point is now. Rob Manfred, the commissioner, whether you like him or not, has imposed a 60-game season where teams will be playing at their home ballparks. They will report on July 1st for spring training part 2. And the way it's going to break down is they'll play 40 games in division and 20 out of division against their geographical counterpart. So interleague will be East versus East, Central versus Central, and West versus West. And Drew, we kind of talked about it last week on the episode where I think jinxed it, the MLB, into coming back, where we talked about how just messy the negotiations were. But we talked about how there were proposed mega divisions. And while this isn't quite what we talked about, it's pretty close. The divisions will still be normal. We will play 10 games against each divisional opponent. So, okay, if you're the Reds, you'll play 10 games against the Cubs, Cardinals, Brewers, and Pirates, and so on and so forth for every other team. And then you'll play 4 games against teams in the opposite division. So if you're an NL Central team, you'll play 4 games against every AL Central team. And Will, you brought it up earlier, no expanded playoffs either going into this. So the way the divisions are built will keep the playoff picture the same as it always has been. But I do think we're getting the universal DH.
Well, yeah, we definitely are.
Which is the most exciting part of this.
Yeah, obviously we won't know if it's going to stick until after those 2021 negotiations when they redo the CBA. My guess is, though, even in the limited sample size we're going to get this season, I think enough people, at least within the sport, are going to say, yeah, we like it. It'll probably stick. Which, as a purist, I'm not a big fan of. I love seeing the pitchers hit. I think it adds something something to the game, even if overall, there's evidence out there that proves pitchers don't really do much for the offense. I think it's still cool to see guys go out there and play the full game. But anyway, I think it's definitely going to stick after this season. But I think for now, it's just, again, it's part of the one-off scenario that they've kind of created here because of the coronavirus.
Yeah, we're all NL guys in this group right here. We've got Reds, Dodgers, and Cubs. But yeah, I know I mentioned when we talked about this last week, Jackson, how I think I do like seeing pitchers hit to an extent, but the way the leagues were set up, where one league used DH and the other didn't, was just sort of messy and really unnecessary. And I think it's been a long time coming. We've been steadily pushing towards a universal DH. So I just think this was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. It's a position that people can agree on. There's not a huge outrage against it, especially amongst the players, which that's what matters the most. It's the players who are going to be having this decision. I don't think the owners really care if their pitchers go up and hit. So yeah, I think it's been a long time coming. We've just sort of reached that point. And frankly, I'll miss it to an extent, but 5-10 years down the road, I'm barely going to remember pitchers stepping up to the plate because it's just going to be a normal thing. And I think that's what the AL has had. To the AL, Nelson Cruz not playing the field is just a normal thing.
I think it goes back to just people have to get used to change, and change happens in sports. Yeah. I mean, there was a time when the NBA didn't have a three-point line. Imagine the sport without it, There was a time when kickoffs in the NFL were in a different spot and nobody cares anymore. Or the same with extra points. In NASCAR, so many things have changed, and their fans have to get used to it. I mean, sports go through these changes, and baseball has had 1 foot in, 1 foot out on this for 5 decades now.
Yeah, I always had a feeling like at some point there would come a day of reckoning, if you will, where it's they're going to go one way or the other, where it's either everyone goes DH or they revert back to all the pitchers have to hit. But I always kind of felt like whatever they decide, it's probably they're not going to go backwards in time. They're probably going to go forward and go all DH. So again, this is not permanent. For the season that would come after this one, so the normal 2020-21 season, that would go back to normal and pitchers would hit in the National League. But my guess is, again, once the CBA comes around, we'll probably see a permanent universal DH in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point that it was going to go one way or another. They weren't going to keep this divide for long, and I don't see any reason that the DH has been negative to baseball. There have been incidents where pitchers step to the plate, get hit by a pitch, they get injured, or trying to leg out a triple, and then they are worn out for the next inning, that sort of a thing. But the DH is overall a very good thing. It's extended so many guys' careers. Guys like David Ortiz, Nelson Cruz. I mean, one of my favorite all-time players, Jim Thome.
Let's not forget the greatest DH of all time, Edgar Martinez.
Of course.
Who was a third baseman and then got too old, but he could hit.
Right, and now some DHs are being inducted into the Hall of Fame, and that used to be sort of a question mark. So I think once the Hall of Fame starts accepting it, I really don't think it's going back.
Right, and I do want to bring up something that I have come across on the timeline is the Reds beat writers were talking to Dick Williams, Cincinnati GM, and he said that he had been building the team to have a DH, and that other NL general managers have started to look at the possibility of this coming and had been starting to build their teams according to that. And if you want proof, look at the Reds' possible lineup of where Nick Castellanos would normally be in right field. Now he gets to DH, and you don't have to have his, however defensive liability he is, self out in the outfield, And their lineup's looking Nick Senzel in center. Okay, Votto at first, Castellanos DH, which is ridiculous. Suarez at third, who hit 49 home runs. Moustakas at second. Jesse Winker in left. Tucker Barnhart / Kirk Casale, just a rotating catcher. And then Freddie Galvis at short, who is no slouch at the bat. And Shogo Akiyama in right field.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, definitely solid. I mean, you look at Drew, you and I, the Cubs and Dodgers too. Those are teams that, for a while, have been built for that, especially when you
Yeah.
get to the playoffs and if you hopefully get to the World Series, you're kind of built to have that depth. Look at Kyle Schwarber, is like second all time for National League hitters hitting home runs as a DH, and
Yeah, Schwarber is built to be a DH in my mind.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I
exactly.
mean, on the Dodgers, you have no shortage of sluggers, but now maybe you can substitute one of them out who maybe isn't the best with his glove and still have his bat in the lineup.
You could,
Yeah, and something I think this could lead to, I'm more so in the NL because it's already been a thing in the American League. But this is going to generally eradicate the use of pinch hitters in the National League. You're just not going to need as deep of a bench
Yep.
in terms of pinch hitting. So what do you do with that bench if it's not going to be the guy to just come in and replace the pitcher? You're going to start looking at more platoons. And that's something the Dodgers have done significantly is they've got, Jock Peterson only plays against, he only plays when his matchup is favorable. And so I think, and especially in more of a sabermetric and analytical type of a field that we're looking at now, I think we're going to see a lot more teams start to use that because you've got extra guys on your bench who, if your third best bench hitter is never going to step to the plate unless he has a reason to. And that reason might be because he just annihilates lefties.
right. Yeah, I think it's definitely that, and you're going to see a lot more just defensive substitutions late in games. You're going to see guys coming in for their gloves, and that's it really. Like you said, the extra bats become a lot less relevant when you have the DH all the time. So I think it'll be interesting to see how much, even just this season, the strategy changes for NL managers.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. But now that we have this, I do think we need to really look at what this could do competitively. I mean, going into the playoffs. Does this change any of the predictions of the Yankees being world eaters or the Astros and the Dodgers going to be two of the toughest teams to beat in their respective divisions? I mean, what does this change now with the way it's structured? Anything?
To an extent, I think most of these teams are going to stay the same based on what we predicted at the very least. Of course, there could be a team that just skyrockets. And where it's going to get competitive is in the central of both divisions. Because we discussed that there's out of the 10 central teams, there's maybe only 3 that won't win the division, that don't have like a legitimate shot at it. There's 7 teams out there that could all fight for it. But what I think is going to do just a 60-game season is you're going to see a lot of these teams that were maybe anticipating rebuilds or starting rebuilds. I think they're going to start to put their foot on the gas because for a team like the Red Sox, what do you have to lose now? All you have to do is beat the Yankees through 60 games. You don't have to worry about it through 162. And they knew they weren't going to beat the Yankees through 162. So they started making the team a little younger, working on salary cap. They sold off Mookie Betts to get Alex Verdugo and some prospects out of that. And now, who's to say that Verdugo doesn't out-hit Mookie Betts through 60 games? Now, He probably won't because Mookie Betts is that good. But at the same time, it's only 60 games. Any team can, jump out and take the bulls by the horn, I guess.
Right. See, I think that's the biggest thing is like baseball is a lot about sample sizes, and one bad week in August in a normal season, it might hurt you, but if you've got a strong lead on your division, you're probably going to be okay, right? One bad week this season, and you're probably out of it. You're thinking, all right, what's my draft position? Because really, they're starting July 24th, and the season goes till September. You do some very rough math, that's about 9 weeks. That's just not a lot of baseball. 60 games in 66 days. A lot could change pretty quickly. So I think it's going to force teams to, they're really going to have to go out, almost treat it like the playoffs before the playoffs because so much can change.
Yeah, every game is going to be intense, and every game is going to have to be played like it's for a playoff spot.
A 4 or 5 game losing streak this season would be the equivalent of like a 15-game losing streak in a regular season.
You can't. Teams can't even recover from a 7-game losing streak in some normal seasons. Imagine going on a 10-game losing streak. You're down a sixth of your season, pal. You're out of the playoffs unless you miraculously rattle off 26 straight like Cleveland did a couple of years ago.
Yeah, but similarly, that's going to keep a lot of teams in it because the Yankees aren't going to have a 20-game division lead, nor the Dodgers and the Astros, which is things that have happened before.
This brings up another point is teams like the Pirates and the Reds and the Orioles have been known to hang in there in seasons where they haven't been that good, but they've been known to hang at least a little bit before the All-Star break, and they've been in striking distance going into the All-Star break, and that's where they usually lose that momentum. But, like, one of those teams who weren't predicted to be good might just get lucky. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked to see a team like Detroit just, like, take advantage of everybody else being rusty and somehow sneak their way into a wild card, whether it be earned or not, and whether they'd be there in a normal season or not. And that leads me to my next question is, if we get to a World Series, if we get to see that, does it take away from the legitimacy of it?
That's a tough question. I've thought about that one a lot.
Because we had this discussion in our hockey episode, and the difference there is they had already played a majority of their regular season.
Yeah.
And they pretty much had playoff standings set. And then the expanded playoffs changed a couple things, but they still played 70-something games. And they're still going to play a normal playoff after a play-in round. So it's more hockey than they would have played. But here, it's much less baseball going into a normal playoff. Does this change the legitimacy? In my mind, usually I'd say no, but it's such a reduction of a season.
Yeah, you're right. It's so little baseball, which is where it's going to get interesting. I think I honestly think it might depend on who wins. If the Dodgers or the Yankees or the Astros, or even someone like the Braves, if one of these teams that's been consistently good goes out, wins the series, I mean, it's a normal playoffs schedule, so if something like that ends up happening and a powerhouse wins, I feel like some people might grumble under their breath, but overall, no one's going to think twice about it. And in history, we're just going to move on as like, okay, there was another World Series win for the Yankees, or the Cubs had a good stretch those, 5 years. Oh, well. But I think if the Royals win the World Series, people are going to question that.
I mean, if one of these up-and-coming teams, like, for example, the Cincinnati Reds wins it, or the Tampa Bay Rays win it, I mean, I feel like people are going to look and say they benefited from the short season, and they're not going to give them the full credit they deserve.
Yeah.
I think it's possible, but at the same time, I think a World Series is a World Series. It's still legit. And look at, I mentioned like the hockey example. Yeah, sure, things are a little screwed up now because they have that expanded like play into the playoffs, and it'll be the same with basketball. But at the same time, I mean, these teams were teams that showed they could compete throughout the regular season. If like the Orioles somehow win the World Series, then I'd be like, okay, well, that's just a complete fluke. But I think for the most part, like if it's a team that can hang around, they deserve it. And you know what? If you can win a majority of your 60 games, get into the playoffs, and then go through 3 rounds and hoist a trophy, I think it's still legit. To me, that the playoffs will be the great equalizer, even though it is so random. Once you get there, the team that can play it right, they play the right cards, they deserve to win. If the playoffs have not changed, the rigors are still there. So to me, I think it would be a legit series.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's a good point too, because the playoffs it's not a different format. They're the exact same thing. So once you get in the playoffs, each team has to then go through that process and actually win the World Series, which has been so hard for many teams to do. So unless it might depend on the playoff structure or the dynamic of the teams that are in the playoffs. If the Royals come out of the AL Central and the Orioles come out of the AL East and the A's come out of the AL West, granted the A's are a good team, but still, if that's your playoff dynamic, then people might question it. But if it's something like the Yankees and the Twins and the Astros and your wild card team, maybe it's like the Rangers, then that normal playoff dynamic, you still have to go through.
All right, so If you saw me lag or anything, my power went out here, and now I'm on my hotspot on my phone. So, Will,
Wasn't a good start.
I'm
That's
gonna
not
restart
good
you.
at all. No.
Damn, dude, this is tough. Will, if you want to keep talking about the point you had about hockey teams and the 2013 Chicago Blackhawks, I won't. You can go ahead with that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the main thing for me, we're talking about the legitimacy here of a world play. Can we count? Yes. Because, you go season, and then they go on to win the Stanley Cup. But it was a shortened season because of the NHL lockout. But their name is still on the Stanley Cup. They're still the champion. They're full asterisk on the Stanley Cup. Same goes for the NBA champions when they had their lockout season. They still won. This is not like, oh, well, it doesn't count because it was a short season. I think the same would be said here. Obviously, baseball is a different animal because we're so used to having over 100 games, and that really narrows out who is the best team. And then they go to the playoffs from there. But to me, you look at it, you're still going to have to battle. There is still very much adversity here. This is not like they're just doing 60 games for the heck of it. I mean, like, there's a lot to worry about. There's a lot to consider here. So I think 100% the winner of a World Series this year, if we do get to that point, the second.
You can the last 60 games of a season. Generally, they do reflect which teams end up making the playoffs. Obviously, there's a little bit of leeway, and you can point back to, well, the Nationals, were terrible entering June last year, and they were losing record and all that. And they won on an incredible run, and that's amazing, but that shouldn't be expected every season. And you can also look as like the difference in the one pitch in the 8th inning of their wild card game could have eliminated them, and they wouldn't have won the World Series, and no one would have cared. One pitch in the Game 5 of the Dodgers series could have eliminated them, and they wouldn't have won the World Series, and no one cared. So, not to discredit what the Nationals did. What they did was incredible, but that isn't the expectation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we're sitting here expecting that 128 games is the exact number to represent the best teams every year, then I think we're being a little idealistic there. But I think those 60 games will at least give us a basic structure that can take us into the playoffs in good faith.
Absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned the Nationals. Through 50 games last year, they were 19-31. So the eventual world champions wouldn't have even made the playoffs in this scenario. So what can you do, right? It's weird. I think you just gotta, you play the cards where they lie.
Yeah, but also if there were 120 games, they wouldn't have made the playoffs. Each season has its own ins and outs, and the 60-game season is going to be very similar. Yeah. Just the difference is, as you mentioned, those ins and outs might be a 5-game losing streak or a 10-game winning streak can win or lose your season for you.
Yeah, it's never perfect, but this is what you can do right now.
Exactly.
And the one last thing I want to bring up. So the negotiations were messy, and it took away a lot of people's excitement for the sport. And there are still some people. Oh my God, the tower's back.
Congrats.
There are still some people where they're saying, like, I'm not excited for this season to come back because it just took all the passion out of it for them. Do you get that viewpoint, or do you have any similar feelings? I mean, this is a pretty common thing I'm seeing across multiple social medias, and I've heard in person too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for me, I definitely consider myself a diehard baseball fan. I mean, it's been hard to watch. It's frustrating because you're seeing two sides. Consider the context too. These are two sides that are arguing more than anything over money. Like, a lot of the other sports, they got past that right away. They passed resolutions. They were ready to go. They just had to get their health and safety protocol. They're figuring out the minute details, right? Baseball, up until now, had been stuck on how are we going to get paid or how many get like stuff that when you look at the context around us in the world, we have 40 million people unemployed here in the U.S. and 100,000 plus dead from coronavirus, and numbers surging all around, and that's what they're worried about. For casual fans, I mean, that's an immediate turnoff. Plus, when you're not seeing the game every day, it's like, well, out of sight, out of mind. Baseball, they're trying to attract the casual fans. That's how you grow the sport. Already a screw up there, and then like I said, I consider myself a diehard fan. Just watching the way they handled everything, and it didn't seem like there was a concern about the fans or a desire to get back and satisfy the ones who helped them make all the money, right?
That's fair.
Yeah.
It's more than fair.
To me, it's just frustrating. After a while, I was over to just the constant, well, it looks like there's a deal in place, or the Players Association has offered a deal, and then 2 minutes later, the owners say, well, we reject the deal.
Dead on arrival.
Yeah, just the constant for after a while is just, I was over it. Falls back, because it could have been so much worse. Whoa, Jackson's back. Jackson's back.
So,
we just
okay, that should be the last of the technical difficulties.
There we go. We've got the power back on and everything.
Amazingly, we're still recording, and you look so
Man.
much better now. You're not grainy anymore.
Yeah.
Editing this will be a hell of a time.
But yeah, I'm bitter. I will say, I'm a little disheartened by what happened. And
Yeah.
I think it's going to take a while for baseball to get past this. I mean, this is a tough look for them, really. And if more of the same happens, which I think it will, after that next season, when they actually have to do the real bargaining agreements, they're going to lose a lot more fans. I think that, they've really put themselves on the edge of the cliff here. They're hanging on for dear life right now. So
They are 100% going to have to find a way, not only just to get back the diehard fan, which is something I never thought I'd have to say, but the casual fans, like, that's who you really rely on when it gets to the playoffs and the big games and the All-Star game and the times you really need TV ratings,
Yeah. And there is no All-Star game now.
Yeah, so like you're gonna have to work really hard to market the game, to put on a good show, and maybe the University H is part of putting on a better show. I mean, at the end of the day, and you hear this in sports a lot, especially sports like racing and NASCAR, is it's entertainment, and you have to change the game to make it more entertaining.
Yeah.
And Rob Manfred, you can tell he's been trying with all these weird rules he puts in place. Whether you think they're successful or not, he's kind of trying. But I think the one that is the slam dunk to try and get casuals back into it and diehards is the universal DH. And like, games
It's a baby step that's doable.
Yeah, the game is gonna have to be willing to change more to get more eyes on it.
Yeah, and that's something that Will said earlier that I think is interesting. Is he said a lot of fans are just sort of bitter at this point. I think that's a very good word to use.
Right, and for a lot of fans, the owners, what they were doing in the negotiations were to get fans on their side and look at the players with disdain and see the owners in the correct light. And sadly, that worked on a lot of people. So
Yeah.
a lot of fans have bad feelings towards the players, which doesn't
I think
help.
that harms the sport even more, because at the end of the day, how many casual or diehard fans really feel that they're connected to their team's owners? No, you have your connections to your players. I've got players' bobbleheads up here. I don't have player owners' bobble. Actually, I do have a Magic Johnson one, but that's not the point. The point is, I'm connected to my favorite players, and I turn on the TV to watch them. I don't care about the owner in the booth, and in most cases, most fans are that way too. So you need to be connected to the players, and not being able to see them is going to make it a lot more difficult. But I will say, trying to be optimistic, I think a lot of diehard fans, at least once it comes back to their teams, once their teams and those players they care about are back, I think they'll return. It might take a little bit of time. I think they'll return. And that CBA bargaining, that could end up being detrimental too. But until then, I think what's going to get the casual fans back is going to be the playoffs, because that's what most casual fans care about anyways,
And the
is
playoffs
watching
have
the
to
big
be
sluggers and the aces in the playoffs. And I think as long as that goes off without a hitch, which, knock on wood, that's saying a lot. But if that goes off
so.
without a hitch, I think you'll bring a lot of those casual fans back, and it'll be not a clean slate, but as close as you can get for the start of the 2021 season.
So what do you think if the playoffs do have a lot of weird, random teams? Will that be good for fan engagement? If the World Series is a Cincinnati Tampa Bay or a Chicago White Sox, Oakland Athletics, ALCS, or just these weird matchups that are going to be possible, do you think that's good for fans, or do they want to see the Yankees and the Dodgers and the stalwarts?
I think fans want to see those big teams, but I don't think it's much different than most other years, because I mean, just like look at playoff revenues. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I'm assuming here, but a Yankees Dodgers World Series is going to bring in a ton more viewership than an Oakland Cincinnati World Series, and that's just based on the size of the fan bases and the prestige of some of these teams.
Right.
So I think that could happen anyways. But I just think as long as there are a few of those big names and enough fans who care about those teams to come back for playoff baseball. And I mean, some of these games make themselves. Like I'm remembering the Rangers versus Cardinals World Series. Those are two like mid-market teams, but one of the most incredible World Series I've been able to see.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be these big names. I think once you get into the postseason, that's where the magic is going to happen. Now, yes, Tampa and Oakland are very small markets, but if those two make the World Series anyways, that'll be a very small market World Series, whether it was 2018, this year in a shortened season, or like 10 years down the road.
Mm-hmm.
I say I don't think you can discredit how much there is an appetite for sport. If baseball if things stay on the timeline they're on now, it'll still be the first sport to come back. It still beats out basketball and hockey, because they're not set to come back until the fall, really. So I think just the appetite for anything other than if you have cable, reruns of old TV shows and old sports shows, and the nightly news, which is just hard enough to watch nowadays. Anything other than that, I think will draw a lot of eyeballs. So I think that could be a saving grace. If they had more games, maybe even better, obviously. But I mean, if it's smaller teams in the World Series, Drew, you're right. The bigger markets, they always draw more fans. That's the way it goes. But I don't discount. I think there are a lot of A's fans. There are a lot of White Sox fans.
Playing from Quieter Coyote.
Hello. My Alexa chimed in.
Quite the episode here.
Wow. Special guest. We didn't even plan on that one.
I tell you, I think, Drew, you're kind of spot on. Honestly, as long as you get to the playoffs, I think enough people will be there. I think you'd be surprised at the kind of attention it would get.
Yeah, and at the beginning of this season, before the pandemic hit the United States, before the season was canceled, if you had told me the Orioles were going to play the Pirates in the World Series, I would be like, what happened? Something went wrong. But at the same time, if you said it was going to be Tampa Bay versus Milwaukee, I'd be like, interesting, but two good teams. They deserve it,
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that will definitely get lower viewership than, the Red Sox Dodgers World Series of a couple years ago. But at the same time, I think a lot of it's just going to be is if we see these teams as being deserving, and we will have 60 games to at least see some of these teams as being deserving.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
No team is going to get in with a sub 500 record.
Wouldn't that be something?
I mean, that would. I guess I can't guarantee that.
Maybe
But that's especially rare in baseball.
Yeah, maybe one division is just such a dumpster fire.
It could be, honestly.
But yeah, I think it'll definitely be interesting. But I think unless you all have anything else to add, I think that's about it. I mean, like I said, reporting July 1st for spring training 2.0, and they hope to get the season started on July 23rd or 24th. So it's coming. It's soon, about a month now.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have MLB baseball, whether you're excited for it or not. And I can't blame you if you're not. So, just real quick, I do want, and we talked about it last episode, Drew, but I want to hear Will's thoughts on it. Give me your World Series matchup after all of this.
Jeez. It's honestly been so long. I forgot who's on what teams now because there were so many moves over the winter, and then all of a sudden, we've been gone for. It's been all close to 260 days, I think.
I forgot that Jason Kipnis was a Cub.
Yeah, I
Until
kind
saw some
of.
posts
I
about
forgot
it.
Jason Kipnis and Steven Souza are
Oh,
Cubs.
I didn't even know Steven Souza was still in the league.
But man, put me on the spot. If I had a guess, I would say out of the NL, it'll probably be. I feel like the Dodgers. I do.
I just
I saw the point in there, but
not
I
that I was
think,
trying to sway you or anything, but yeah.
the Dodgers. Obviously the way things are going to work out, like they're going to be special modifications to rosters and stuff. But just in general, the Dodgers have a pretty deep lineup, and they've got a really good young pitching staff. It's a nice mix of young guys with old guys. I think that's a winning combo. I think that they'll have enough juice to get out of the gate hot and stay hot for 60 plus games. And then out of the American League, that's tough. I'm always high on the Rays and the A's just because they've built their team so well. But you look at the other contenders out there. I'm gonna have to go with tough. I would say we might get a Dodgers and A's World Series, or Dodgers and A's World Series.
Okay, I like that. I like that a lot. I would be a big fan of that.
That would be a fun one. And I do want to at least mention while we've brought up the Dodgers, I'm sorry to do this, but one thing I'm looking forward to at the very least about the shortened season, just a 60-game season, is the past several years we've seen Cody Bellinger be a very strong first half player. He won the MVP last year, but admittedly he fell off in the second half. He's done that before. A lot of big Dodgers power bats have sort of fallen off in the second half. So now there is no second half to do that anymore.
Let me tell you what, that's a good point because Derek Dietrich last season hit like 15 home runs in the first half.
Yeah,
and
I looked
on a
up.
tear, and like who knows, man? Maybe Derek Dietrich wins 2020 MVP.
That's why I looked up the Dodgers' 60th game of 2019 just to see where people were. Cody Bellinger was batting .376, and Jock Peterson had just hit his 18th home run. 18 home runs he's a platoon bat on the Dodgers. Maybe he'll DH next year. I don't know. But he's pretty much strictly platoon at this point. And he had 18 home runs by the 60th game.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, you get to the playoffs. The Dodgers already have a whole group of pitchers that they're going to rotate in and out throughout the season. So maybe we get Kershaw with a fresh arm, which would be really nice to see. I trust Buehler all day, every day. It only took like a season and a half. That's, I consider him the ace of the Dodgers at this point.
I remember the first time I ever heard of Walker Buehler. It was against the Reds, and Matt Harvey was the opposing pitcher. And Matt Harvey took him to the woodshed, man. It was a bad game for Buehler. And then he comes out and is one of the best in the league. So he just needed to get his feet wet, and then he was good to go.
Oh, yeah. No, I've been following Buehler for a while. He's a Kentucky boy.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. And then he went to Vandy, which Vandy produced some of the best baseball talent out there.
Dansby Swanson,
came through the Dodgers minor league system.
Yeah, dude. I mean, Vandy. We could have a whole episode just talking about Vanderbilt baseball.
Oh, my gosh,
and
yeah.
their impact on the game.
Yeah.
It's actually insane. But, yeah, I think that's about it for this episode. I'll try and edit it into something, man. I don't know. But, Will, thanks for coming on, taking some time out of your day. Drew and I will see you on Friday with another episode of Director's Cut. And, thanks for watching. Stay safe out there, and we will see you.